All right, great. Well, welcome and thank you to everyone who's joining us today for our workshop on college admission essays for students with learning differences. My name is Kate Pillette. I am an academic life coach. I am a certified school psychologist, and I also previously worked in higher education in disability and accessibility services. So that's kind of the background that I'm bringing to the workshop today, and I'm really excited to partner with Geoff for his expertise as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. My name is Geoff Decker, and I'm a college essay coach. My background is in journalism, so I'm a trained journalist, and I bring kind of journalistic methods and interview-based approach to college essay coaching. In addition, I identify as a neurodiverse learner. I was diagnosed with ADHD, and it's been really a central part of who I am, including my approach as a parent, but certainly my work as a journalist and now as a writing coach. And so I'm really excited to have met Kate and just hear about like all of her expertise in this domain. And I think we have a really interesting kind of intersection of for this event, for this webinar.
Yeah, and I actually think, Geoff, before we get started, since we have a small group, I'd be interested in hearing who's joining us today. So if you're willing to share, if you want to introduce yourselves and let us know if you're coming here as a parent, a coach, a consultant, a student, that would help us to know who our audience is too.
Sure, I guess I can go first. So my name is Saeed Tamboli. I'm from New Jersey. I struggle with dyslexia, so that's the reason why I'm here. And yeah.
Cool. So you're a student, Saeed?
Yeah, I'm a student. Yep.
Great. Good to have you.
Thank you.
My name's Ivy, and I'm an academic coach and an EF coach. And I have like a 20+ year background as a writing coach, although I've been transitioning out of that a bit the last 3 years. I usually work with a few students a year on college essays. It's just like a small part of my practice, but it's something I love, love, love to do. I just love it. So I'm just, I love the process. I love taking students through that gateway before they go off to college, where they really get to see themselves through their own writing. I love everything about it. And so I'm excited. I work with a lot of kids with learning differences, although not all of my college essay students have learning differences. Anyway, yeah, so I'm really excited to hear your particularly advice around how to discuss learning differences within essays and just helping students tap into what's really meaningful for them to express.
I love your enthusiasm, and I share that as I'm about a year into this work, and I'm passionate about helping people like tell their stories as a journalist. And so, yeah, it's just been working with the sort of younger, like a teenager age has been just delightful. I like how you put it, the gateway.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Ivy. And Mary just put in the chat, I'm Lily, and I'm here because I'm interested in learning tips for writing my college essay. So it sounds like you are also a student, which is fabulous. All right. So I think if we want to move on to the next slide, Geoff and I both know that the college application process can be loaded with a lot of different feelings, a mix of big feelings. So we were curious to know how you all feel about the college application process right now. So you can do a reaction or put an emoji in the chat and kind of let us know. Yep. So Saeed's like, oh. Ivy or Mary, if you want to chime in, let us know how you feel about the process in general.
I like to take people from the thumbs down, which is where they always start, to the heart.
I love that. Yes, I think it's true. People often tend to start feeling not great, kind of overwhelmed, stressed out,
Totally
unsure.
overwhelmed. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And Lily, if you want to chime in, feel free, but if it's not convenient, that's okay too. Saeed, do you want to elaborate at all on your feeling on your emoji?
Yeah, I'm just kind of worried about like, I don't know, different aspects of the process.
Yeah,
I'm
there's
also
certain
just,
aspects. Are there certain aspects that worry you in particular?
yeah, kind of like how to make my story come across, because like, like I struggled in certain classes because of my disability, and like kind of communicate that, and hopefully that like kind of makes up for, something in my core portfolio in a way.
Gotcha. I think you are definitely in the right place then, Saeed. We cover a lot of that today in terms of like how to tell your story and if your disability is a part of your story or not, how to articulate that. Awesome. So yeah, so it definitely seems like, it's pretty common to have some stress, maybe some more negative, overwhelmed feelings about this process. But ultimately, there's a lot of people who could be on your team to help get you to that heart, as Ivy said, right? So yeah, we kind of covered like what are some of the main stress points or some of the main pain points with this process. For our workshop today, we are going to quickly go over the pros and cons of disclosing a learning disability in your college application. So we can kind of go through the fact or fiction on that. We'll talk about if you should write about your learning difference in your college essay, how to make that decision, and then the best way to go about that. And at the end, we'll wrap up going over some strategies to make the essay writing process less stressful for everyone involved.
Yeah, and as we go, if you have questions, just drop them in the comments. Feel free to use the comments as like a dumping ground for stuff. We can get to them in like as we're going, or we can get to them as we take breaks and stuff. But yeah, feel free to ask and or just pipe up whenever something comes to mind.
Definitely. Yep. Like I said at the start, benefit of being a small group is we can make this more interactive. So feel free to chime in. All right, but quickly, I do want to go over fact or fiction with college admissions and learning disabilities so we can all get on the same page with this. So one of the most common questions I think that I get from families is my child or my student required to disclose a learning disability in their application? Any guesses? What do you guys think? Yes, it's required. No, it's not. Ivy's shaking her head, which is correct. So you are not required to disclose a learning disability in the college application. Geoff, do you want to click over? I think to the next slide. No, all good. So it's actually not legal for schools to ask about your disability status. The one tiny little exception to this would be is if you're applying to a college specifically for students with learning disabilities. So a school like Landmark or Beacon, they might ask you to submit disability documentation, but any other school, you are not required to disclose a learning disability. You can if you choose to, but ultimately it's up to you. All right, so if we go to the next slide, another question is, does disclosing my disability in my application give me access to accommodations in college? Ivy's saying no, which is correct. Ivy knows what she's talking about. So to get accommodations in college, there is a separate process. You need to go to disability services. Sometimes it's called accessibility services, and that is completely separate from your application. So you might not mention your disability in your application, but still be able to get accommodations once you go to college. All right, another question. Does disclosing a disability give me an advantage in my application? This is sometimes a tricky one. Ivy's picking up on the theme here. Saeed too. Yep, so the answer is no. Sometimes where this comes up is maybe, let's say, a student has a disability that impacts their ability to learn a foreign language. So they get a foreign language waiver in high school, they don't have to take it. But then maybe they're applying to a college that expects to see 4 years of a foreign language in high school. The college doesn't have to waive that requirement. They don't have to provide a waiver when you get to college, so they don't have to change the admissions criteria, even if you disclose, well, this was because of my learning disability. Okay, so there's no clear advantage there. And on the flip side, the other question is there a disadvantage to disclosing a disability in my application? And as we figured out, the answer is no. So it would be illegal for a school to discriminate based on disability status. And there might actually be some cases where it could be helpful to disclose a disability to maybe explain a low grade on a transcript, maybe a prolonged period of absences from school. So it might actually be something that you do want to put in your application. But overall, the theme here is that you don't have to disclose. It's up to you. You can still get accommodations if you don't disclose a disability in your application. And there's no clear advantage or disadvantage. It's really very personal, depending on your own case. All right, so now that we all got on the same page about that, one way to take a step back and think about, do I want to possibly disclose a learning disability in my application and maybe even in my college essay, is looking at your transcript and thinking, what story does my transcript tell? And is there a positive story here about my learning disability that I'm actually eager to tell and share? So one way to think about this is if there's a story about overcoming a weakness in a specific area related to a learning difference. So maybe you have a specific learning disability in math. Maybe your math grades on your transcript are lower than all of your other grades, and there's actually a positive story here to tell about overcoming that weakness. Another example might be if you had low or kind of variable up and down grades, maybe while you were getting a new diagnosis or figuring out supports, right? So maybe you were diagnosed with ADHD your sophomore year, your grades were a little bit up and down, but then there's a positive story there about when you were diagnosed, being able to understand yourself better as a learner. And then a third example might be if your transcript shows an upward trajectory from low grades up to high grades as you gain new skills and strategies. That might be another really positive story related to your learning difference that you want to tell in your application or in your essay. All right, and then next slide. So I actually think this is a great question because we have mostly students here. So I'm curious for the students, and Ivy, you can think about this too. How motivated and engaged are you in the college application process right now, maybe compared to like your parents or your school counselor or other people who are involved? So Saeed gave us a 2.
All right.
Yep, and Lily gave us a 2, kind of in the middle, right? Do you guys want to tell us more about that? And no judgment. We're just curious where you're at.
Sure, I'll go. Like, yeah, I'm motivated because like it's something that my older siblings have done. But like I feel it's like it's early right now, right? So it's like I'm just trying to figure stuff out, especially when it comes to framing my story. But yeah.
Yeah, so you said your older siblings have done this, right? So you're kind of following in their path, but it's still new for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Let's see. Lily says, I've been prioritizing, figuring out what I want, and oh, I lost it. I've been doing a lot of college visits. Awesome. So still kind of figuring things out.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you're here, I'll give you guys both, I mean, Lily and Saeed, like, you're here, and that's like a huge sign of engagement, even if it's not the most like pleasant process, but like, good for you. Kudos.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think Geoff and I were hoping that there would be students here, but often it's more parents. So I think this is actually really great. So maybe for you guys to pay attention to on the next slide is thinking about ideally what is the student's role in this process, because this is your story, right? The application is about your educational history, your goals, right? Where you've been, where you're going. And the metaphor that we use for this is like when you're learning to drive, right? So when you first got behind the wheel of a car, or if you haven't learned to drive yet, you can even think about like riding a bike or something like that. Your parents don't steer for you while you do the gas and the brakes, right? That would be a disaster. So you need to be the driver in that situation. And you also need to be the driver when it comes to your college application. And what that means is that you really have to take initiative and responsibility. Some ways to do that are you should be the one asking for help, right? So you should be the one meeting with your school counselor, creating the list of schools that you're looking at when you go to tour different campuses, asking for letters of recommendation from your teacher, right? You should be the one driving all of that. You should also be the one who is staying organized. So ultimately, you should have a list of the schools that you're applying to, everything that's required as part of that application, keeping track of those deadlines, keeping an eye on your email, right? And then this last piece is also really important. You need to be able to understand your strengths and interests, as well as your learning preferences and your learning disability. And this is important not only when thinking about like what type of school might be a good fit, what you might want to major in, but being able to express this in your application, right? So Saeed, you mentioned being able to tell your story in your application and having that come through. I think you're right on track with that because you are the best person to talk about your strengths and your interests and who you are as a learner. All right, and on the next slide, we also want to be clear about what is the parent's role. So in this case, the parent's role is to be the passenger. They can be right there with you. They can help, mention if like, oh, that light's turning red, there's a stop sign coming up, there's a deadline coming up. But ultimately, they're not the driver. The student is the driver. But parents can provide a lot of help and support in this process. They can create space by having a designated time to talk about the college application. So instead of feeling like it's constantly in the air, hanging over everybody's heads, you might want to set up a time, maybe Thursday evenings. We all sit down for an hour and we talk about what's going on with the college applications. Parents should also be open and transparent about what goes into making the college decision. So certainly any financial considerations, any geographic considerations. Parents need to be open and honest about what choices are available to their student. Parents can also model executive function skills. So we don't want parents doing things for the student, but they can sit with the student while they do it. They can do a practice run through. I'm thinking about like using an assignment tracker to organize all the steps of the application. They can help the student contact the schools to schedule the tours or the interviews or things like that. But parents shouldn't be doing anything for the student. And finally, the parents can be a gentle nudge, right? They can remind the student about their goals, their values, why the college application process is so important. They can nudge them about upcoming deadlines, but ultimately the student needs to own the process and be responsible for that. All right, next slide. All right, so a good way to kind of shift this responsibility from the parent back to the student is to come back to this question about why go to college in the first place. Sometimes we kind of take it for granted if other people around us are going to college. We just assume that's what we're doing too. But the student needs to be able to answer this question. So this is a great question for parents to have a conversation with the student, kind of talk through the reasons why you might go to college. And this is a really good question for the student to keep in mind when thinking about their application and their essay, because ultimately you are trying to get at, why do I want to go to college? Why do I want to go to this college? So does anyone want to share? You can either unmute yourself or put in the chat what your reasons are for going to college or your reasons for your child to go to college. Or maybe why you went to college yourself. All right, so Geoff went to college to learn more about the world. Saeed is hoping to go to college for a job and to meet new people. I think I definitely went to college to meet new people. That was what I was most excited about.
Yeah, I could say that's a rosy version. I feel like this is a question I didn't ask myself. And if I was an 18-year-old self on this webinar, I'd probably shrug and say, I don't know, that's just what my parents say I have to do, which is, why I think a question like this could have helped me a lot in the process. But I'll give you my spun answer 20 years later.
In hindsight, right? All right, well, I think for the sake of time, we could move on to the next slide. Oh, and Lily just added, it's a good spot for in between high school and real life. Yep, because you can start to gain access to real world opportunities. I think that's very true, right? You start to step outside your comfort zone, but college is still kind of a safer, more contained place than the real world. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to take over for the next few minutes to talk. We'll go a level deeper. We talked a bit about what isn't necessarily part of the college application for students with disabilities. Now we'll talk about what is included for basically all students. I like to think of your college application as a symphony. It's got different sections, different parts, and each plays a distinct role. But on their own, they're sort of incomplete. But when put together, it makes up a well-rounded composition. And so one of the the biggest pieces, let's call it the leading melodies, are going to be the academics that you're probably familiar with your student. We're talking about your GPA, the curriculum. Admit someone who just popped in. And so from this, college admissions offices will look at your transcript. They'll look at standardized test scores from exams like the SAT and ACT. Quick note, every college has different requirements from a testing policy perspective, and just be sure to check that. And honors and achievements to show if you have a particular expertise in an academic area. And then letters of recommendation, which Kate mentioned earlier. These will be letters from favorite teachers who can expound upon your intellectual curiosity, provide context around how you think, you create creativity. And then there will be a letter of recommendation from your counselor. And that letter is kind of to provide perspective about you in the context of your high school and your graduating class. And then a quick reminder just on this, if you are a rising senior, it's important before the end of the year, if you have not already, to ask 2 teachers for a letter of recommendations before they head into the summer, so that when the school year starts, that teacher will have a record of writing it, because once the senior year starts, things go quickly on the college application process. So those are kind of the academics are the big pieces first and foremost, but there's lots of other pieces of the application, and this is what I call the harmonies. These are the things that basically showcase other sides of you or provide context that can't show up elsewhere on the application, particularly on the academic transcript. So colleges want to know more about you besides your grades. And so they want to know about your values, your identity, your culture, your family. They want to know about if you have special skills, talents, hobbies, extracurriculars. They want to know about leadership opportunities that you've engaged in. They want to know if you're about your service work and your work experience. And so they can find this out in a lots of different ways. There's your activities list, which is basically your resume. And then, of course, your writing materials. There's the Common App personal essay, which we'll get to more deeply in a moment. And then additional writing supplements that individual colleges put into their applications. And then there's a field called additional information. It's about a very short field, 150 to 200 characters, I think. And that's often another place where you can just add context to explain changes in your grades that correspond to, I don't know, basically to explain why one subject you might have lower grades in versus another. So, and also, oh yeah, one other aspect, there's also a letter of recommendation that you can ask for from like a coach or mentor, a supervisor, employer that could provide context about you outside of the classroom too. That's typically an optional one. So let's go like one level deeper, and we'll focus on the non-academic side, because this is where I think the college essay can be a major advantage if you pull it off. And also much of the academic stuff is fairly straightforward. For rising juniors, a lot of it is baked in. You've already completed 3 out of 4 years of high school. So your GPA, while certainly will differ, could change. That's fairly set, as are the courses you've taken. But what about these other parts? How do you get across these things into your application? And that is where the essay comes in. And a big question for this webinar is, what should I write about? More specifically, should I write about my learning disability or learning difference? So for that, I have prepared like 3 kind of big pieces of advice, and I'll for each one we have some examples that we can read through together. The number one piece of advice when it comes to writing about a significant challenge, such as your learning disability, is tell a story, a positive story of growth. And this is a balancing act. On the one hand, you want to show vulnerability. You want to share how you've encountered setbacks and obstacles, and you'll need to explain how it affected you. But your essay also has to show how these obstacles have been fundamental to personal growth or future success. So think about questions like, what did you learn from these obstacles? That's really a key question that you'll want to answer. Let's look at an example from a real life essay from a student who wrote specifically about their college, about their disability in their essay. This is an excerpt, but let's all take a minute and read through it. And I'll ask you, let's take a minute to read through it, and then for about 30 seconds. But as you're reading through it, what do you think the student is trying to convey with their essay? Feel free to drop it in the comments, or just take yourself off mute and share.
Geoff, I might actually read it out loud, because I think we might have a couple people who aren't watching the screen. So if anyone wants, I can read it out loud too.
Okay, yeah, please do. Thanks, Kate.
Compassionate teachers made the reward of being successful so much greater that I came to love school, while the unaccommodating teachers showed me the importance of advocating for myself. My learning difference also taught me to embrace differences in others. Because I have learned to find my own strengths in unconventional places, I have learned the importance of doing the same for others. Currently, the most challenging part of dyslexia is overcoming the logistics, scheduling extended time for tests, arranging computer access for in-class essays, planning ahead to source books on tape when necessary. I know that I will have to navigate the logistics of college just as I have navigated the logistics of high school. But now it won't be a question of whether I can do it, just of how.
What do you think? Does anyone have general feedback? What do you think the positive story of growth is here? Can anyone share just a key excerpt that, stuck out to them?
I think the ending was pretty powerful of like, oh, it's not whether if I can do it, it's just like how I'm going to do it in college. It kind of shows that you might be prepared for college.
I love that closing. I think it's kind of a fairly straight, it's something that kind of a lot of essays have to have at the end, which is like, okay, spin this story forward so that me, the admissions officer, understands how this will carry forward into your post-secondary career. Yep, Lily talks about tying it to the future as well. What stuck out for me? You know, I liked that in the second paragraph, how there's still a level of like the most challenging part. It's straightforward, is continuing to overcome the logistics. There's really specifics here and how this person is clearly showing an awareness of their learning difference and how it affects them, how it's shaping themselves as learners.
Yeah, and I really like the part in the first paragraph where they talk about finding their own strengths in unconventional places, right? I think that's something that resonates with a lot of neurodiverse students. And it also shows that like the students probably a pretty like creative problem solver, right? That they've found a way to make these things work for them.
So here's we just touched on a few of them, but other ways in which college-bound students with learning differences can share about it. So share insight into how your learning difference has shaped you, tolerance for others, pride in accomplishments. There's a lot of different values and ways. The key is really whatever topic you decide to write about, whether it is a learning difference or whether it's a totally other topic. The key is really tying what you're writing about to the values that that represent you, so they have a better understanding of who you are beyond just a specific topic. Now, admissions officers are reading through hundreds of college essays. You don't have much time to grab their attention. It's not even a guarantee that they're going to read through the whole thing. And so that is what leads to my second major piece of advice, which is that Quirky works. And it's one of the things I've learned personally as a writing coach with some of the students that I worked with. Because look, an unassuming topic can present yourself in an unpredictable way that will stick out in the reader's mind. Unpredictable is good because it means that you're grabbing the attention of these people who are skimming through your essays, and to the extent that you can get their attention, because they are reading a lot of essays, probably about a lot of the same topics: sports achievements, sports injuries. There's a lot of like generic ones, and not to say any one topic is better than the other, but I think this approach could work particularly well for students with learning disabilities who have unique character traits, or who have something basically like who have quirky aspects, maybe a quirky passion. And so let's look at a very well-known quirky essay topic. This one is about ketchup, and I'll go ahead and read this one. And I'm going to not be able to pronounce the first word. Mortusiquisophobia, the irrational fear of ketchup. It started when I was 6 years old. I was eating chicken nuggets with my family. Someone brought out the ketchup. I refused. Immediately, all eyes turned to me. Why don't you want ketchup? Do you think you're special? It's just tomato sauce. I was bombarded by their queries, attacked by their judgments. How could I explain the feeling of dread that I got from this horrendous substance? The headache I got from its nauseating odor. People assume that I disliked ketchup because of its color or because of its principal ingredient. They try to assign some reasoning to my phobia. They search for some traumatic event. My phobia is purely irrational, and the dissonance I experience from this fact outweighs the repulsion that I get from the sauce. Throughout my life, I've dealt with my problems by rising above them. I would widen my perspective, look in from the outside, analyze, and break them down. Logic and reason are my weapons, so why couldn't I transcend an idiotic fear? Why couldn't I stop my heart from racing whenever I caught a whiff of the vile condiment. Super quirky. I like the approach, but like, we don't know much about this writer yet, right? It's like got my attention, but ultimately this essay wasn't really about a fear of ketchup. It was actually about them overcoming their fear of ketchup. And so I'll continue reading because I like how this writer tied it in a not significant way, but like basically like closed the loop. A few weeks ago, I volunteered to serve the 7th and 8th grade students as they went to Arizona for a 4-day retreat. I spent 10 hours of the day setting tables, serving food, and cleaning the tables again. One condiment was always missing from the tables that I waited. But when they had hot dogs for lunch, I couldn't refuse their request. I reluctantly brought out the ketchup. When the students left, there was ketchup everywhere, on the plates, on the table. They had even squeezed some of it into the pitchers. I stared at the war-torn table, frozen, on the verge of hyperventilating. I took a step forward and then another. I picked up a plate that had ketchup smeared upon it, as if it were a piece of buttered toast. As I inspected the monster, it didn't seem as evil as before. My parasympathetic nervous system kicked in, slowing my heart rate. Then again, I was holding my breath. Before I knew it, the table was clean, and I started on the next one. I still avoid ketchup. I still feel like passing out when I'm around it, and I will never voluntarily consume it. I will also never cease my tendency to question and justify everything around me. I won't be able to reason myself out of every situation I get into, but when life becomes irrational, I can continue. I can trudge on. So this is a student who shared on a Reddit board. You can Google it to see. And basically, it's someone who felt their grades were good, but wasn't sure if they were going to get into their reach schools. But this got them into the University of Chicago, which was ultimately where they went. And so it speaks, and this person attributes like their essay to their success in getting in. So, all right, and so let's pivot now to the third, which is getting started. And basically, my tip for getting started is that talking is faster than writing. And this is like really key to my approach. The college essay asks so much of its writers. It asks you to write something super powerful, impactful, but also to keep it authentic. We ask students to write in this personal narrative style that they haven't received that much formal training in, if you think about it. We ask them to do it in 650 words. We're asking 17-year-olds to answer these really big questions about life, like sharing wisdom that even myself would struggle with. So a common thing that I hear from parents and also students like this is this: I'm like a deer in the headlights. They look at this blank page and it's like, I don't know where to start. And one way to start is think about your mouth as a faster processor of information than your hands, your motor skills. Talking helps you process all the essay ideas, all the half thoughts and words bouncing around in your head. It helps you reflect on important things and people in your life, and you don't have to worry about all of the formalities of writing. So put away the blank page, and to carry through to a parent I talked to, who I was talking to after I had worked with their student, put it in really great context, I think. It's just much more natural to talk about an experience or a difficulty, to relate a life event, or show excitement for an interest than it is to write about it. And so a few basics when it comes to using your spoken words. Ask questions. Basically, you could find someone that you trust to just ask you some questions, and look to the 7 prompts from the Common App. I'll drop a link to the prompts for those who aren't familiar with them. Record your conversation. Take a look at what you say, what's in the transcript of that conversation, and let those spoken words guide you. Help these spoken words organize your ideas and make thematic connections. And you can even use your spoken words as source material when writing. I'll share, that's basically, I basically, when I'm coaching students, we start exclusively with recorded interviews, and I take transcripts of 15 to 20,000 words and sort of take out all of like the junk, but basically show them, here's what you said about these topics. And usually what they've said about it is a lot more powerful than anything they would be able to write. And just that process creates this clarity and confidence that helps the writing process go so much smoother. All right, I'm going to kick it back to you, Kate.
Yeah, so I think Geoff's process is certainly one way to make the writing process less stressful, right? But we have some other kind of concrete tips for you as well. So one is to be aware of the timeline for juniors, rising seniors. And really, this kicks off right about now. Around May and June is when you want to start brainstorming, thinking about possible essay topics, building that list of schools that you want to apply to. And June and July is when you want to get into the Common App, actually start working on that personal statement, your activities list, the additional information.
Sorry.
Oh, all good. And then in August, you want to start working on the supplemental essays for your early action, early decision schools, so that by September, October, you're working on supplemental essays for regular decision schools, which just leaves anything that didn't get done yet by November, December. And I think the big takeaway here is as much as you can get done over the summer is ideal, so that you're not rushing to do all of this once you're actually back in school for the fall term. So that's one way, is just good time management can reduce some stress. The other thing is to be clear about what the college admission essay expectations actually are. And we don't say this to overwhelm you, but to give you a realistic sense of what you're actually going to have to do over the next few months. So there is one personal statement essay, that's the big one. But on average, students will have about 10 additional writing supplements, depending on the number of schools that they're applying to and the types of schools that they're applying to. You're also going to have about 4 drafts per essay on average. So if we take those 11 essays multiplied by 4 drafts, we are looking at 44 essay drafts that you will likely have to write. So again, this just speaks to starting early, spreading it out over time so that you're not rushing to do all of this at once, right? All right, so if this number is overwhelming, if the amount of work is overwhelming, you want to have some task management strategies. One way to do this is to create a spreadsheet or some type of assignment tracker. I know a lot of students like to use Notion. You could also just use Google Sheets or an Excel spreadsheet where you can keep track of all of the application-related tasks that you need to do, including individual sections of the Common App and the different essays and different drafts that you have to write. So you can have an itemized list of everything you need to do. It can also help too to have maybe a different tab in your tracker for each school, so you don't have to see everything all at once. You can just focus in on an individual school or an individual phase of the application. Another quick tip too is to break down big tasks into super small steps that feel ridiculously easy to complete. So I always tell students you can't go too small with this. Your goal might be to write 5 sentences, 50 words, work on it for 10 minutes, right? You want to make it so small that it feels super easy to start, right? Like, okay, I can do that. I can work on it for 10 minutes. This is especially helpful if you tend to procrastinate, if you feel overwhelmed getting started. Make the starting task super, super small. And then another thing that helps with long-term tasks is to create some mini deadlines with accountability along the way. So January 1st, February 1st can feel really far away. But if we think about, I have to brainstorm by July 1st, I have to have my first rough draft by August 1st, maybe my final draft by September 1st, maybe that's only my second draft. If you make those mini deadlines along the way, all of a sudden, you create a sense of urgency. All right, so those are some tips to help with task management. And this is just a sample tracker that you could use. For most students, the tracker is going to be much bigger because there's going to be more schools. But just for the sake of illustration, you want to have what school you're applying to, the topics of the essays, the word limits, so you actually know when is it done. You want the application due date because that is your final due date. But then this is an example of how you can make mini deadlines along the way. When's my first draft due? A week or two later, my second draft. A week or two later, my third draft. A week or two later, my final draft. Now, all of a sudden, okay, my MIT application isn't due until October 1st, but I need to start it by September 7th, probably even sooner, right? All right, and then some time management tips. So maybe you've got your list, you know what you need to do, but then actually doing it quickly or doing it in time for those mini deadlines is more of a challenge. One of my best tips for this is develop a regular routine to work on your college applications. And what this does is it takes away the decision making. So instead of saying, I know I'm supposed to be working on my college essay, when am I going to fit it in? Instead, you want to say, Thursdays from 5 to 6 p.m. I always sit down and work on my college application or essays. You can put it in your calendar, just like an appointment, just like music lessons, sports practice, tutoring, whatever it is, hold that time sacred in your calendar. Another strategy is to always work on your college applications first when you sit down to do homework, even if it's just for 15 or 20 minutes. And that tends to work because we put off the work that feels optional or not urgent. So if you have homework due tomorrow, that's going to feel more urgent. You're going to get that done no matter what. But if you start by working on the application first and then do your other homework, those 15, 20 minutes every day will add up to more than an hour every week. And then my last tip for time management is use a timer to create a sense of urgency in the moment. So if you are someone who thrives under pressure and who gets good work done under a deadline, set a timer. I wonder how much of my essay I could write in 45 minutes. Go, right? And you'll probably have to go back and edit it and refine it, but that can help you just to get started. On the flip side, if you're someone who doesn't like working under a time limit, if that stresses you out, you can use a stopwatch just to count time up. And what that's going to do is it's going to help you keep track of the fact that time is passing. How long have I been working? All right, 20 minutes. I can take a break. I can call it quits for now. Maybe I want to keep going. How's my pace? Am I working fast enough? If I need to be faster, how can I go faster? So just using some sort of a timekeeping device to be aware of time can be really helpful with this too. And I think Geoff put a particular recommendation in the chat. Creating a to-do list of super small steps is critical for Geoff for making good use of those blocked out calendar events. Yeah, so even making them really specific, right? More than just like work on my admissions essay, it's work on MIT supplemental draft, right?
Yeah, I've been there, done that with the time blocks, and I feel like I've wasted many 60-minute blocks if I haven't gone through, if I don't spend maybe the first 10 minutes or ahead of time actually written out like, okay, what is this hour going to look like? So yeah, I liked how the super small steps approach too.
Definitely. Yeah, and if this is something that you think you might want more help with, this is a lot of the work that I do with students, especially over the summer, is doing some task and time management coaching around the college application. So I'm not an expert in the application itself. For that, you'd want to go to Geoff. But if you need help with the execution and the time management, I can help with that. I also help students with self-advocacy coaching if they are requesting accommodations in college. My previous work in higher education was related to that, so I can help students go over their disability documentation, better understand what their disability is, how it impacts them, and just in general, I can provide time management coaching, learning strategies, motivation support as students transition into college.
And me, yeah, the college essay is, like Ivy shared, it's really a point of passion for me. I think a lot of people view the essay as something to be feared, but I really like Ivy put it, like making it a meaningful process. And I really enjoy the interview process at the very beginning. So I specialize in helping students figure out what exactly they want to write about and how they want to write about it. And so I have a series of essay interviewing plans where we work over the course of a couple of weeks to really basically, work through some of what's on your mind. And then for those who want help with the advanced writing and editing services, I will help you. I will take you to the finish line once we get to the point of actually like having a topic. I will coach you through the process of drafting, editing, proofing, and polishing it up. So yeah, you have our contact information. We'll also send out some stuff after this webinar, including a recording of this, but so that if you ever want to get in touch, or really if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And yeah, we have 5 minutes, and I'm happy to stay on a few minutes over if people have questions, but would love to use this time for people to chime in. We have a small enough group where we can maybe get through a few questions. So Saeed, let's start with you.
Yeah, I was wondering whether you have more examples for essays of people talking about their learning disabilities.
Yeah, I can. Let me see. I have a few links that I can point you to. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head, Saeed, but I coached a student who I know wrote their essay about their own experience with their learning disability, and that inspired them to become a special education teacher. So that's what they were going to college for, was to kind of be the teacher that they wish they had had, which is obviously a very specific example, right? Not everyone decides to go to college to be a special education teacher for that reason. But I think that was another example where it very clearly spoke to how their experience with their learning disability impacted their values and goals for the future.
Yeah, and I just dropped a link to some of the examples. The excerpts that I shared, I got from understood.org. And I'm actually working with a student now, and so we're right in the beginning of the process, who thinks that they want to write about the challenges posed by their ADHD and how they, the struggles that they endured, and how basically interventions in the middle of their high school experience put them on this new trajectory. And so we have another call, so I don't fully know what the story is, but I can, but I'm excited to actually work through them, because as someone who identifies as neurodiverse, but also who's been spending a lot of time on this topic through this presentation, I think there'll be a good opportunity to help them in that regard.
Thank you for the entire presentation.
Saeed, there's an online magazine called Teen Ink, TEENINK, and they have a section where people post college essays also. So you'd be able to look at examples there. I don't know if it's specifically, I haven't looked there for a long time, but they have a lot of college resources. So that's a good one to go to.
Oh, great. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Can I share a couple things with you guys?
Please.
I just wanted to mention that there are places in your application where you can disclose your learning disability that are not in your essay. So you can disclose it without having to make your essay about your learning disability, if that's what you prefer. And I would also say what's going to make the most powerful essay is to take us into a moment in time. So you've got your big idea, and then tell a story in the moment in time. So for example, Geoff, where you shared that first essay, where the student said, you know, I've learned to like really something about encourage other people in in different situations, like right there. That's where you want like a specific story, like what happened. And the more you can take us in, it's counterintuitive, but the more you can take us into that moment in time, the more powerful your story becomes, because we're right there with you. So those are just 2 things I would say. And don't worry about getting it down. Just, vomit it on the page or vomit it into the microphone, like Geoff said, and just get stuff out. And then you look for where the energy is. You look for where the energy is, and that's where you're going to start. So you really don't need to worry about it, because worrying about it is just going to make you restrict, and you don't want to restrict. You want to come forward. And you'll be surprised what comes out. Oh, and one other thing, and then I have to jump, but one other thing is your parents are really, really, really good resources for remembering stories that relate to the prompts. So your coach, Geoff as your coach or Kate as your coach, is not going to be able to know everything that's going to has happened to you, but your parents will remember. And so utilize them in the ways that feel good to you. You don't have to have them in every bit of what you're doing, but there are ways to powerfully utilize what your parents know about you and make it a lot easier to do your writing.
I think that's excellent advice.
Yeah, Ivy, feel free to drop if you have to go, but I want to respond to that, because oftentimes I find that I often find that there's such tension in the college essay process between the parent and the student, for a lot of reasons, but not necessarily. But she makes a great point. Like, if you can sort of like understand that the parent has can be sounding boards, can be a fact checker for your experiences, then it really does sort of open up the opportunity to figure out, like, do I have this story right? Yeah, those are great points. I'm glad she shared those. We have a few, so does Kristen or Lily, is there any questions that you have specifically about yourself or just in general about the process? If not, I think we can wrap, but we'll hang on for a few more moments.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, like Geoff said, it's absolutely fine if you want to reach out over email. If you have follow-up questions for me, I think the same goes for you, Geoff. I know sometimes being in a public workshop can feel a little bit awkward, but if you do have follow-up questions or something for either of us, please feel free to reach out.
Yeah. Cool. And yeah, we'll put together an email with some of the resources that we've shared, and including the recording. So we'll do that probably tomorrow morning. I'll follow up with you, Kate, about that.
Sounds good.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye. Thanks, everyone.